show us we don't need to be perfect to do what's right. It's not about living without fear, but facing injustice. It's not about being powerful, but finding your calling when you least expect it. They show us it's okay to be vulnerable, no matter how tough you are. Because even though they're heroes, they're still human.
A creator, a mentor, an inspiration, and yes, a hero to many, this comic book icon leaves behind a legacy that will not soon fade or be forgotten. Welcome to WatchMojo, and today we're commemorating the great Stan Lee. Join us as we celebrate this vibrant, enthusiastic, and creative life by revisiting the innumerable contributions he made to the world of comic books and pop culture, as well as the ways he touched countless lives.
Let's do the list. Spider-Man.
Guilty.
The Incredible Hulk.
Afraid so.
Oh man, this is so cool. The X-Men.
Now that you mention it.
Shit, man, you are a god!
On November 12, 2018, we lost one of the greats. Within the world of comic books, it could be argued that there was no single figure more important or influential than Stan Lee. Though he perhaps had equals in terms of creative contributions to the medium, Lee outshone them all by making himself a leader, champion, and ambassador of not just Marvel, but the medium as a whole.
In those days, grown-ups hated comics, didn't want their children to read them particularly. So I figured I'm not going to use my real name, which I'm saving for posterity, for these silly comic books. So I cut my first name into two, called myself Stan Lee.
He was Stan the Man, Smilin' Stan, the Generalissimo, the godfather of comic books. To older generations, he was a figure revered for his numerous creations and colossal role in the industry. For the youngest fans, Lee was this omnipresent, almost magical grandfather-like figure.
What's the matter with you kids? You never seen a spaceship before?
Even those too young to appreciate or understand his importance to the medium recognized him and knew they were in the presence of someone great. His infectious energy and unbridled enthusiasm transcended generations. Though it's hard to imagine considering the heights to which Stan Lee rose, his career in the industry began modestly.
I got into comics by accident when I heard there was a job open at Magazine Management. They wanted me to work in the comic department.
In 1939, at the tender age of just 16, Lee, then known as Stanley Martin Lieber, got an assistant job working at Timely Comics. As Lee himself put it, his tasks were simple and included things like proofreading, fetching lunch, erasing pencil from finished pages, and keeping the inkwells full for the artists.
I remember the first day he came here, he came to the office. He had a little flute and he'd sit in the corner and play his flute and drive Jack Kirby crazy.
2 years later, he would get his first credit in 1941's Captain America Comics number 3, writing a short story called Captain America Foils the Traitor's Revenge. That same year, he began writing actual comics and was soon co-creating characters like Jack Frost and the Destroyer. Lee learned under the guidance of two greats, Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. When both left the company in 1941, Lee, just 19 years old at the time, was named interim editor. A charismatic, motivated, and clearly talented young man, Lee soon saw interim dropped from the title. In the years to follow, he would also serve in the Signal Corps of the U.S. Army during World War II and meet Joan Clayton Bucock. The two were married in 1947 until the time of Joan's passing in 2017.
I personally believe that she's the reason we're here. I think Joni is responsible for the Marvel Universe, right? Because,
She's responsible for my universe,
Right.
that's for sure.
During Lee's time as editor-in-chief, Timely would evolve into Atlas Comics and eventually Marvel. Though superheroes had been popular when Lee first joined Timely Comics, the readership lost interest, and under Atlas Comics, the focus had shifted towards other genres. Publisher Martin Goodman suggested that the company push back into superhero territory as DC had done. Hard as it is to imagine in hindsight, Stan Lee, unhappy in his work, was contemplating a change of careers. Thankfully, Joan came to the rescue.
She gave me the world's greatest advice. She said, why don't you do one book the way you want to do it? The worst that'll happen, he'll fire you, but you want to quit anyway. At least you'll have gotten it out of your system. I thought that was good advice.
At his wife's insistence, Lee took this new comic as an opportunity to write the sort of story he cared about. The result was Marvel's first family, the Fantastic Four. Co-created with Jack Kirby, the Fantastic Four were different from their predecessors in that they were morally complex, flawed characters. That made them relatable, and readers quickly responded to this new breed of superhero. Lee had started something truly incredible, an entire new chapter in the history of comic books, and some would argue, the modern style and culture of comic books as we know them today.
It sold very well. We had never gotten fan mail before, but we started getting fan mail, and that started it.
It was the Marvel Revolution. The themes were more relevant, the readership more engaged, and the industry, well, it changed forever. What followed was a period of highly condensed, game-changing creative output on the part of Stan Lee, usually as a team with Kirby. The Fantastic Four was a hit, and over the next few years, their world was soon filled with a wide range of colorful heroes, including the likes of Thor, Daredevil, Hulk, and Iron Man, among others. Undeniably, the most notable Stan Lee co-creation of the period was Spider-Man, who debuted in 1962's Amazing Fantasy number 15.
Spider-Man, Spider-Man, does whatever a spider can. Spins a web any size, catches thieves just like flies. Look out, here comes the Spider-Man.
Publisher Martin Goodman apparently had little faith in the character, only approving a trial issue because Amazing Fantasy was being canceled.
My publisher, when I suggested the idea, he said, that's the worst thing I ever heard of.
Why?
People hate spiders. You can't call a hero Spider-Man.
Much to Goodman's surprise, it proved to be a bestseller, and so an ongoing solo series was greenlit. Lee and co-creator Steve Ditko had given birth to one of comics' most iconic heroes and pop culture staples. Not long after Spidey's debut, Lee and Kirby broke new ground once again with their superhero team, the X-Men. Wanting to skip over a power-related origin story for each member, Lee labeled them mutants. Little did he know just how major a role they'd play in Marvel Comics for decades to come. Not only did the school setting make the characters relatable despite their powers, but this concept of mutants also allowed Lee to address issues near and dear to his heart: prejudice and racism.
There seems to be some quality in human nature where if everybody had the same religion and everybody lived in the same country, probably the black-haired people would hate blondes and maybe the redheads would be shunned. I don't know, it seems that some people have to have somebody else to feel superior to and a dislike.
Part of what made Stan so special is that he went out of his way to connect with the readership. He wasn't a faceless editor, and under his leadership, Marvel was not just some unreachable entity selling a product. He made readers feel like the writers, artists, and editors were their friends, and in reading their adventures, their peers. He believed in creating a sense of community, and one of the ways he did this was through the Bullpen Bulletins. Marvel Bullpen Bulletins debuted in 1965 and provided insight into the inner workings of Marvel Comics, ranging from previews to spotlights on staffers, all done in a friendly, casual manner. The starring attraction of the Bullpen Bulletin was Stan's soapbox. Here, he established a first-name basis with his readership, and popularized such catchphrases as True Believer, Make Mine Marvel, and of course, Excelsior.
And I would talk about anything that occurred to me, about politics or about school.
He also used to voice his opinions and take a stand on important issues like racism. In a 1968 column, he stated, quote, "Bigotry and racism are among the deadliest social ills plaguing the world today." He also expressed that, quote, "A story without a message is like a man without a soul." These were powerful and bold statements for their time, and they still resonate today. In 1972, Stan took over from Martin Goodman as Marvel's publisher. Though he eventually became the company's president, he stepped down and returned to the position of publisher, preferring to be more directly involved with the comics themselves. Even after he retired in the 1990s, He continued to support Marvel as the face of the company and an important voice of authority.
Coming up soon, you guys are going to have the Marvel characters fight the DC characters, correct?
We refer to it as the mighty Marvel Universe versus the DC heroes. And
Even well into his golden years, he never stopped connecting with fans both young and old, be it through public appearances, new creative endeavors, or his dozens of memorable cameos.
Now don't you move. My hands aren't as steady as they used to be.
It's difficult to put into words just how huge of an impact Stan Lee has had on this world. Comics were long dismissed as trivial entertainment, but under his guidance, they became a serious medium through which important lessons and themes could be taught to readers of all ages. As anyone lucky enough to meet the man will tell you, he always had time for a fan. His ability to make every individual feel like an old friend was his superpower. As purveyors of pop culture, we here at WatchMojo can say that he's had a huge influence on all of us. It's hard to imagine future MCU films without a Stan Lee cameo, but through his many works and his enduring message of equality, this hero will live on forever.
You know, I guess one person can make a difference. Enough said.